On today's American Football Stories episode, we'll recap this weekend's college football action. American Football Stories is brought to you by Coach Paint. Coach Paint is a great tool that allows us to add graphics to player highlight clips similar to the graphics you see on TV. Coach Paint offers the ability to clearly illustrate video while increasing retention of information in a shorter amount of time. Up your game with Coach Paint today.
What time is it? Game time! It's gonna be special. They gonna talk about this forever.
Welcome to American Football Stories.
Puts his head down, crashes and spins, and dives. Touchdown!
Bringing together the many perspectives that make up college football in the NFL.
Football is one of the greatest sports ever invented.
From players and coaches.
Believe, baby, believe, baby.
Hey, we playing to win right here, fellas.
To the front office and scouts.
The public is finally beginning to catch up, but they don't even know half the truth.
Us against the world, let's get it.
Your hosts, Robert Parker and Nick Knudsen, bring you American Football Stories.
Welcome to the American Football Stories podcast brought to you by Coach Paint. Today is October 25th, 2020. I'm Nick Knudsen, my co-host Robert Parker III. How's your weekend going, Rob? How'd you like the games?
Great to have the Big Ten football back, I tell you that, Nick. Great games this week, exciting finishes, both on the collegiate level and on the NFL level. So ready to dig in and dive in and talk about some of those games.
Yeah, we only had one cancellation on the college front. New Mexico at Colorado State, flat out canceled. We talked about that a little bit on the last podcast. We're going to start seeing that a little more than just postponed. It's nice to think we're going to make these games up at some point, but I think we're just going to start seeing the word canceled a little more than postponed. All right, Thursday, October 22nd, Arkansas State versus Appy State. The Mountaineers defeat the Red Wolves 45-17, not even close. Friday night, we open Big Ten play. Illinois goes up to Wisconsin. Rob, another game, not all that close. Graham Mertz put on a show. His debut, the redshirt freshman quarterback, goes 20 of 21 for 248 yards and 5 touchdowns. Looks like we'll see some split duties in the Badgers' backfield. 13 carries from Garrett Groshek. Nakia Watson had 19 carries. And Isaac Garendo racked up 11. So not quite the, we're used to seeing Wisconsin with the bell cow back. Not quite the same deal that we're used to seeing. Plus, hey, solid quarterback throwing it all over the yard. Illinois, they showed some potential at the beginning of the game, but they just kept shooting themselves in the foot until it got out of hand, and it ended up being an ugly game all around for the Illini. But definitely see the talent on the field for the Illini, Rob. What did you think about this game?
Yeah, just like you said, it was definitely a thumping. Wisconsin pretty much, showed who's one of the premier teams in the Big Ten. I know it was a tough game for senior quarterback Brandon Peters, but I tell you what, Illinois does have some talent on that team, but you just have to think that Wisconsin was going to come out with a bad taste in their mouth from that upset loss of last year's game. So I think Wisconsin, and, just like you said, redshirt freshman quarterback, he came in, he threw the ball around the yard, and, he looked good doing it. So it's definitely going to help having a passing game with the loss of Jonathan Taylor, that got drafted this past year. So it seems like this Wisconsin team might be throwing the ball around a little bit more than we normally see, Nick.
Well, it does look like that on paper, but after losing Jack Cohn, Graham Mertz was forced into starting. Graham Mertz test positive for the virus today for COVID-19. And you know what that means with the Big Ten? That means a 21-day quarantine. So you're looking at least at Nebraska and versus Purdue the next 2 weeks on the line for Mertz, potentially even as far out as at Michigan on November 14th. So they're going to verify it. He's going to take another test to verify. But, man, that's a bummer. It's just right out the gate. You end up losing the kid for 2 weeks at least.
Yeah, I mean, but one good thing that Wisconsin have to, lean on is that defense. That defense looked really, really stout. Mm-hmm. I know, that Illinois' offense is not, one of the best offenses in the Big Ten, but just like we said it earlier, they have some weapons. But that Wisconsin defense kind of picks up where it left off from year in to year out. So I think, having that defense on side of the ball, if you lose your starting quarterback, can definitely help out a lot.
Starting quarterback, yes, but technically second string quarterback, now third string quarterback. So that's something to look out for with Wisconsin going to Nebraska next week. Definitely want to follow up and see how Graham Mertz tests again. But bad news for the Badgers if that's true. All right, Jacksonville State upsets FIU in the FCS over FBS matchup 19-10. Tulsa lays it to South Florida. Got a little bit of rebuilding to do under Jeff Scott. Stay patient, Bulls fans. And the Raging Cajuns goes into UAB, finally puts a loss on Alabama Birmingham on that field in Birmingham there. The Blazers hadn't lost there since they've been back as a program. 24-20. That was a pretty good game. I checked in on that one Friday night when the Wisconsin game got out of hand. All right, let's go to Saturday. You got number one. We're going to go in order with the rankings here. The number one Clemson Tigers. Syracuse comes in as a 46-point dog. We were kind of laughing at it last week, Rob. And it found itself down 27-21 late in the third when a fumble return for a touchdown put Clemson up 34-21. The Tigers end up pouring it on 47-21 the final. Maybe Clemson was officially sleepwalking because their schedule's pretty boring. Looking like Notre Dame might be the only remote thing remotely resembling an obstacle here, Rob. And I'll apologize. I'll give a pseudo apology to the Irish in a minute. But I don't see them as a team that's going to give Clemson a lot of trouble. So is Clemson getting bored here? What's going on with that? How do you explain that 27-21 in the third quarter?
Yeah, I think you nailed it on the head there. You said they were kind of sleepwalking through the game. Once again, we laughed at that spread being so high. You kind of figured that, Syracuse was going to compete and kind of cover the spread. But once again, this Clemson team is just, overloaded with talent. Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne, and Amari Rodgers, the three-headed monster, they just keep rolling week in and week out. And you kind of see a little boredom, playing in, a little complacent in there. But once again, they just have so much talent that even though when they're sleepwalking, they can still beat a team by 3 touchdowns or more. But I think, this is more indicative of Clemson sleepwalking, more so of Syracuse kind of competing and putting up a fight.
Are we punching that playoff ticket for Clemson?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, it's done.
It's done. It's
done.
definitely done.
Another playoff ticket that's looking nearly punched here is Alabama going into Knoxville, 48-17. Bama jumped up 21-3. Tennessee wasn't remotely competitive. Mac Jones, the bright side of the Volunteers, they held him under 400 yards passing. He only threw for 387. I think this guy is the closest thing we're going to have to Joe Burrow this year. What a progression from last year. He did look good in the limited opportunities he had, but I didn't see this coming from Mac Jones. He's been awesome all year. Of course, he's had incredible weapons. That unfortunately took a hit this weekend with Jalen Waddle going down. Lost for the season with a broken ankle. Best wishes go out to Waddle on his recovery on that one. But tough break for the Tide. However, you still have Najee Harris, who is a machine, churning out 3 more touchdowns. John Mechie steps in. I mean, he's made a few big catches here and there. Got to think he'll go up in his production. He puts up 7 receptions for 151 yards. The Tide, they're not in trouble. They got a wealth of playmakers. It obviously sucks losing Jalen Waddle, but if there's one team that can afford to do so, it is Alabama. Rob, here's my question for you. If you had to cast a Heisman ballot today, are you going with Mac Jones or Najee Harris?
Wow, I would definitely have to lean towards Najee Harris. Once again, he has 14 touchdowns on the season already, and it just seems like we had a conversation about Najee Harris, being a Alabama running back from the past, but he's each one of those guys. He has a little bit of Mark Ingram in him. Yeah, he has a little Derrick Henry in him, has a little, Josh Jacobs in him. So he's kind of all of those backs kind of put in one. And I think you're kind of really seeing his overall talent this year. And you're going to see a little bit more, especially with the loss with Jalen Waddle moving forward.
I mean, it's almost looking like those are the top 2 competitors for the Heisman right now, Harris and Jones.
Yeah, but unfortunately with Alabama, it seems like they're going to cancel each other out because Mac Jones is definitely having a Heisman, campaign, and so is Najee Harris. But it really seems like this is Trevor Lawrence's award to lose. I know we're going to talk about Ohio State and Justin Fields later on in the
Yeah, you got
segment,
Fields out there.
but
Yeah.
I mean, Trevor Lawrence is just, he's a machine, and that Clemson team is just, it's just a well-oiled machine, and they're just, crushing everyone in front of them. So
I think that hurts Lawrence's chances, and then he's been pulled early. Similar to the way Tua was being used, where he keeps getting pulled from games too. Where I don't know if Lawrence is going to have the. I mean, obviously he could easily win the Heisman if they wanted, but I don't know. Heisman's a goofy award anyway. It'll come up to a couple big games later in the season anyway, but I don't know if Clemson's going to have those games. So that's why I almost feel like Alabama might have a leg up on Clemson for that, but we'll see. You're right. They might cancel each other out. All right, let's go to the number 3 Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Hey, I picked Pittsburgh on the money line. I'll flat out say it. Notre Dame wins this game 45-3. The Irish offense, they finally show up to match the Irish defense. Pitt throws 3 picks. Ian Book goes for 312 and 3 TDs. Notre Dame played great this weekend. I'm going to give them full credit. I'll even do a pseudo apology. I doubted them last week. I said they're a fraud at number 3 in the country. I stand by that though. So that's why it's not a real apology. They're not number 3. I think my mistake is more in that I overestimated Pitt this weekend. But I'll sit there and say Notre Dame is not a playoff team.
I don't see them as a playoff team either, Nick. But I tell you what, this is the Ian Book that I've been looking to see, since last year, and it seems like he's coming along slowly but surely. And if Ian Book can play like this, the way that he played this past week, I think they can give Clemson a tough run for their money. But once again, this Clemson team is a well-oiled machine, just like we said. And I don't think, Notre Dame gets that win, but they do make it a competitive if Ian Book can kind of play to the standard that he played this past week against Pitt. I know it's 2 different teams, Pitt and Clemson, but once again, this is the Ian Book that he has to play this way in order for Notre Dame to even, come close to making a playoff spot.
I know Pitt wasn't good on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, were we talking about 162 yards of total offense, 44 on the ground, 118 passing, 3 interceptions? That won't do much for you. Good effort by the Notre Dame defense, but I did expect more from the Pitt defense. Pitt's played okay at times this year on defense. They seem to have a lot of talent. We talked about it last week with that performance at Miami last week. We thought that defense kept them around in that one a little bit. What happened today? What was this?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe this
Book
is
playing a good game.
Maybe this is a combination of Book playing a good game, but also, us giving a little bit more credence to Pitt than what they
deserve.
Than they deserve. So yeah. I think it's a little bit of both, and I think the Pitt team is coming out in these last couple of weeks. Of this is the Pitt team that we're probably going to see for the rest of the season.
Well, hey Pitt, we tried to believe in you. Notre Dame, nice win, nice playing. I'm not there with you yet. You'll have to show me something. Just play Clemson competitively, and we'll talk. That's all I need from you if you're going to talk to me about being a playoff team. All right. Hey, Nebraska, they go into Ohio State. The Big Ten rolls out there. Okay, Nebraska, you want to play football tour for 2020 by sending the Huskers to Ohio State. The Bucks rolled, but it was a competitive first half. Justin Fields ends up going 20 of 21 on the day. And if I'm nitpicking the Buckeyes, they did end up rushing for over 200 yards, but we didn't see many big runs in this. There wasn't those like explosive J.K. Dobbins type runs. Tough to replace a guy like that, obviously, but it's Ohio State. They manufacture guys like that all the time. Hell of a catch by Jackson Smith in Jabba. I'm going to go with on that. I think that's what Gus Johnson said. Gus Johnson and Joe Klatt, they thought the catch was out of bounds as well. So he gets it in with 1 foot in the back of the end. So highlight catch of the day. I'm sure many of you have seen it on Twitter. Second half was a blowout. But I liked what I saw from the Huskers early on. I'm not trying to pander here because Nebraska, they're the type of program they should expect to win every time they take the field. But we knew Frost had a rebuilding job when he took this over in Nebraska. He's got to rebuild, especially up front. But the Huskers came out, they were fighting early. They were winning a lot at the line of scrimmage early, and it took Ohio State. They kind of delivered some punches to Ohio State. And Frost looks like he has an heir apparent to Adrian Martinez and Luke McCaffrey. If we're being honest, Martinez has been a bit of a disappointment in Lincoln. We expected a little more from Nebraska by year 3, but I think this program was really much lower than we thought it was when Frost took over. And I think he needs another year or two to really get their feet. And I like that they at least have the next guy in line ready to go with Luke McCaffrey, it looks like.
Yeah, I mean, once again, you talked about Ohio State getting off to a shaky start, Nick, but kind of pulling away later in that game. I think that was kind of, them shaking off the rust. And I know Ryan Day came out after the game and he kind of apologized for not, kneeling and kind of running the clock. But once again, we had a conversation about, in order for the Big Ten team to get into the playoffs, they're going to have to put up points. It's going to kind of be like that old BCS system where the eye test prevails, where it's just like, the Steve Spurrier and the Urban Meyers are just putting points up on the board, and you can't leave those teams out of the playoffs. So I think Ryan Day moving forward won't be apologizing anymore for that, especially if, running up the scoreboard is going to get Ohio State into the playoffs.
He did have the backups in, and it was a short field. It wasn't like he was just being obnoxious. They could have taken a knee, but they had the guy who scored was a backup quarterback. He's a freshman. So it wasn't like they were Justin Fields was running the score up. So I think he was doing that. I think he was just saying what he had to say publicly, but I think he was trying to get his guys work. Look, you've had no offseason virtually. I should say super weird offseason. Some of these young guys, if Justin Fields goes down, who does Ohio State have? Those are Jack Miller's first snaps as a Buckeye. So I didn't have any issue with that. And if you're Nebraska, if you got a problem with that, just stop it. I didn't feel like it was obnoxious or anything. I didn't think that. I was surprised he even apologized, to tell you the truth. But interesting point you bring up with the BCS type stuff. But when you had the game in hand, they already had 45-17. I don't know if 52 buys you a whole lot more, but interesting point to consider going forward. All right, let's go to one conference that's definitely going to need a lot of help getting in, even if they're undefeated. But the only team controlling their own destiny in the Big 12 in terms of the playoff race, the Oklahoma State Cowboys. They get a win over the Iowa State Cyclones, 24-21. Rob, I thought this was a well-played game by both teams. We saw the running back steal the show a little bit. Breece Hall, Chuba Hubbard. They were both stars for each of the offense. Oklahoma State welcomed back Spencer Sanders. They definitely missed him. And the Cowboys had just enough pop to get by the Cyclones. Rob, here's my question for you. Brock Purdy, quarterback, Iowa State. 19-34, 162 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. I'm not seeing him develop quite at the rate I had hoped to see him this year. What are we thinking about Brock Purdy right now?
Yeah, it really seems like he's not having that year that everyone thought that he was going to have, especially, being one of the higher ranked quarterbacks that's probably going to come out in this year's draft. He's having his struggles. He's having his ups and downs. He got the big win over Oklahoma, but, in order, you got to keep the momentum going and you got to kind of rack up those wins. And this would have been a big win for him. But just like you mentioned earlier, Spencer Sanders coming back to the Oklahoma State team is going to bode well for them moving forward. It seems like Chuba Hubbard is kind of getting loose and back into his rhythm. So I think this Oklahoma State team has everything in front of them to win the Big 12. But will they make the playoff? That might be up for discussion. Me personally, I don't think any Big 12 team is gonna make the college football playoffs. But going back to Brock Purdy, he has the talent, he has the arm talent, he can make every throw on the field. But it really seems like he's having a regression year this year. I don't know what that is. Maybe due to injuries, or maybe the weapons around him. Whatever the case may be, he's not living up to the bill.
A little surprising, because I really liked what I saw from him. I mean, we're talking about, I think he's only thrown for 5 TDs this year. And this is a guy who I think was 27-9 split with TDs and interceptions last year. I like to see a little more. I mean, we're obviously going to get him back next year at Iowa State, and he's certainly been a solid week-to-week guy for Iowa State, but thought we'd see a little more from him at this point. However, at the same time, Iowa State's 3-1. They're still very much in the thick of things in terms of the Big 12 hunt. They could still get to the Big 12 title game. Top two teams in the Big 12 get to the Big 12 title game, and they're still game ahead of the pack. So not a huge loss for Iowa State, but if they would have won it, they could have really they would have put themselves in a great spot to at least be in the title game. All right, so Oklahoma State, you said up for discussion for the playoff spot. Glad you said that because we'll have that discussion right now. Hey, look, you're 3-0 in conference, and I believe 4-0 overall, right? For Oklahoma State, number 6 in the country. That playoff spot, you're right there. You're going to move up here in a couple weeks. Clemson's going to beat Notre Dame. You're going to have a little bit of movement here in a couple weeks. But if you're Okie State, the biggest thing for you is you're 2 games ahead of Oklahoma. You're 2 games ahead of Texas, West Virginia. They always have a good choke in them at some point when they're good. And you can have that choke this year and not screw yourself out of the Big 12. So let's talk about it. Do we think a playoff spot is possible? They have still a tough schedule remaining. You got Texas next week at Kansas State, who, by the way, is 4-0 in the conference. We'll talk about the Wildcats in detail in a few minutes here. But at Kansas State, at Oklahoma, versus Texas Tech, at TCU, at Baylor. Do any of those games stand out as a game that they're going to definitively lose outside of maybe Oklahoma?
Yeah, I mean, I can see them, losing, the Texas game. But once again, in order for Oklahoma State to get into the playoffs, they're definitely going to have to run the table. But I just think the Big 12 as a conference is kind of down this year. You see the losses that Oklahoma State suffer. You see the losses that Texas suffer. So even if Oklahoma State, runs the table and wins the conference undefeated, I think it's going to be kind of hard for them to kind of get in the college football playoffs. But I mean, in order for them, they kind of need to win out. So all those games that we're mentioning right now, they need to win those games. There are must-win games for Okie State moving forward, and that's the only way they get into the playoffs.
We agree. They got to be unbeaten, but Texas at Kansas State, at Oklahoma, versus Texas Tech, at TCU, at Baylor. Look, if you get by the next 3 games, Texas, K-State, Oklahoma, and your last 3 games are Texas Tech, TCU, Baylor, I'm feeling very good about your chances of getting into the playoffs. So really, the next 3 games are something to watch for Oklahoma State here, starting with Texas this week. So Okie State, let's see if they can have that breakthrough year they've been so close to having several times under Mike Gundy. Hey, Rob, we had another team that had a big breakthrough this weekend. The Indiana Hoosiers. Jeremy Coleman. Shout out to Jeremy Coleman. Hey, this is a game of the year candidate. Indiana finally breaks through in one of these close games against a big boy and pulls off an upset. They've been pesky under Tom Allen. They've been close a few times, several times, I should say. And the Hoosiers get a 36-35 win over Penn State, number 8 Penn State in overtime. Like I said, game of the year candidate. Indiana led most of the way until Sean Clifford of Penn State drops back and finds Jahan Dotson on a 60-yard TD pass. Dotson had split the safeties, took it to the house. When Indiana turned it over on downs with 1:47 left, it looked like the Hoosiers were dead in the water. Penn State really just had to run the clock out, kneel down. But running back Devin Ford, he took the bait. The Indiana defense allowed him to run through cleanly. He got excited. He saw the end zone. It was hilarious, though. Did you see him? As soon as he got to the goal line, he tries to pull up and stop, but he crossed the goal line. His momentum carried him over, and the Indiana defender runs over almost in shock and is signaling TD. You ever seen that out of a defense before, Rob?
No, I haven't, but I know we've seen Todd Gurley kind of pull that off a couple of times where, he runs to the goal line and he kind of lays down. And I think that's what Penn State was trying to do. But just like you said, the momentum kind of took them over. So I think Indiana was so excited because they had so much time left on the clock.
Right.
And I tell you what, I wish Penn State wish they could have that one back.
But you saw it from the kid, from Ford. As soon as he crossed the goal line, his shoulders slumped. He looked right over at the sideline, I imagine directly at James Franklin. And he was just like, damn it. Like you could see him just all life leave his body on that. And Indiana celebrating the touchdown. It was hilarious. It's just hilarious if you think about it. But the Hoosiers, they then take it over. They drive 75 yards, 7 plays. They get a little life back. Uh, Michael Penix Jr. ties things up by running for a 2-point conversion. They end up scoring a touchdown, get a 2-point conversion. Penn State, their offense struck quick in the overtime with a touchdown. Indiana answered. Tom Allen decides to go for 2. And we saw the closest conversion of what we'll call a successful quote unquote conversion that you'll ever see in the sport of football. And Michael Penix rolled out to his left. He ends up diving fully extended as he's being cut off by a couple Penn State defenders. Fully extended, ball hits the pylon, but it looked like the ball may have hit out of bounds before it hit the pylon. However, they made the call as they signaled it as good, and you need to be 100% certain to overturn it. And I don't think you could say either way is 100% certain, but if I'm 60% certain, Rob, I think the ball hit out of bounds, and I think that was just shy of the pylon. I think Indiana got a gift there.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that one. It definitely was short of the pylon. It really kind of seemed like, the ball hit the ground and then he kind of pushed it forward a little bit. But once again, great play by Michael Penix Jr. You tip your hat off to him and the Indiana Hoosiers for putting up a fight. I knew this Penn State team might struggle, especially with the opt out of Michael Parsons and the medical condition with Journey Brown, the running back that's going on. Who I know it's an undisclosed illness or injury. No one really knows about that, but I didn't see this coming. But great game for Sean Clifford, especially from the running standpoint on the ground. But going back to that play, Nick, I definitely agree with you. I thought the ball was short of the power line. But once again, it's not enough to overturn it. So you kind of have to let that call stand as a touchdown that it said on the field. With that being said, great win for Indiana. But I think Penn State, they have Ohio State next week. It's going to be an uphill climb for them. They're going to have to win out if they want to make it into the playoffs.
Yeah, I don't think we're talking playoffs anymore with Penn State after losing to Indiana. That's you got an 8-game schedule. I think you got to run the table in the Big Ten. Now, certainly, if you beat Ohio State, you can maybe talk again. But I don't know. One loss is going to be tough with an 8-game schedule. Indiana goes to Rutgers next week. Let's see if they follow up. How they follow up that performance. Great win for the Hoosiers. Excited to see them pull one out. This I thought was going to be the greatest sports moment in the day until I watched the World Series. The end of the World Series. Did you happen to catch that?
I did get a chance to catch that.
Man. So, yeah, we had some exciting moments on Saturday night. Exciting moments on Saturday night with some sporting events here. So, great. Best time of the year for sports when you got the World Series going on and college football is starting to get into full swing here. All right. AAC action. I was super pumped for this game. The American. I'm pro-American Athletic Conference. I think there's a lot of good football in the American Athletic Conference. I was pretty disappointed with the Cincinnati SMU game, though. I'm not talking about the fact that Cincinnati won 42-13 because they pulled away late. 91-yard touchdown run by QB Desmond Ridder helps the Bearcats pull away late and give Cincinnati the inside track to the New Year's 6 Group of 5 bowl bid. Rob, we discussed BYU potentially making the playoff. I was hoping one of these teams would I was hoping this game would look good enough to where maybe we could, propel one of these teams into that conversation. And certainly I think there might be an opening this year for the AAC, but I don't think either one of these teams look like they deserve that to be in a playoff conversation.
Yeah, I know Cincinnati is having a great season, but once again, when you talk about Cincinnati, you put them up against the elite programs like the Bama and the Clemsons. I don't think they deserve to kind of be in that conversation. But you definitely tip your hat off to them for having a great season. I actually expected SMU to kind of put up a tougher game than what they put up, but it just goes to show you that the Cincinnati program is really legit. I didn't get a chance to watch a lot of this game, but I definitely from the score, I thought SMU would kind of keep it a little bit closer than what they did.
Yeah, pretty dull game. Actually Saturday night. That's one of the reasons why I think a lot of people in the football world end up flipping on the World Series. On top of the fact that it was an epic game with Tampa Bay and LA, but it was just kind of a lot of dull games going on too. Not a lot of great football going on Saturday night. One of those dull games was Virginia at Miami, and they played a Friday night game last year that was very similar to this. And my reaction to Miami's 19-14 win over the Cavaliers is meh, just meh. Nothing exciting. Miami's 5-1. I'm impressed they're taking care of business. That hasn't always been a thing the last several years for Miami. Derek King's a solid QB. The defense is good. This Canes team, it's good, not great. It's a step forward this season, but we got a ways to go before we get back to what Miami wants to be, right?
Yeah, I mean, every week you hear their narrative of is the U back? Is the U back? I definitely don't think the U is back, and if they are, they're definitely not winning 19-14 to Virginia. So I tell you that, just like you said, great win. They're taking care of business. But as far as Miami being back to an elite level program, they're not there yet. I'm glad to see Manny Diaz kind of turn the program over, at least from last year. They have talent on the outside from the receiver standpoint with Mike Harley. Just you mentioned De'Aaron Keeneck, and he's a great quarterback, throwing the ball and running the ball. The defense definitely have talent, but it just seems like they're missing something.
Yeah.
Whether it's the veteran leadership or whether it's that standout player that you typically have in Miami. So it just really seems like they're missing a couple pieces. But you tip your hats off of them for getting the job done. So whether it was a grind out win or whether it was a blowout win, a win is a win. So Miami, they're not back to the Miami that we're used to seeing, but just like you said, they're probably one of the better teams in the ACC, but definitely not on the level of the Clemson to compete with them.
Not number 11 in the country. Good. I
No,
think that they're a little overrated in the polls right now. They got a lot to prove. Just keep taking care of business week in and week out, and you'll jump right back in there, Miami. Don't worry about it. Just worry about taking care of business. I like that Diaz at least has them winning games, and that's not something we've seen them drop games that they should win over the last several years. So we expect. I think Virginia went down there and they beat Virginia last year too. Actually, never mind. But so I'll say this: the next 2 weeks you got at NC State, at Virginia Tech. You want to show everyone you turn a corner. Those are two games that Miami probably struggles to win the last couple years. Take care of business in those games, Diaz, and we'll start buying in a little more on Miami again. So that's all. It's impossible to ask people to compete with Clemson. I'm not asking that. Just be good and take care of what you can take care of. If you can get lucky enough to they got North Carolina the final game of the season, Rob. Best case scenario is that Miami North Carolina game on December 5th is a play-in matchup for the ACC title game. So just stay in the hunt, Miami. That's all you got to do. All right. Texas State goes to BYU, gets absolutely thrashed 52-14. BYU offense did whatever it wanted. Just absolutely looked dominant. Quarterback Zach Wilson, 19-25, 287, 4 TDs. Wilson's getting a lot of love, Rob. I think he's going to end up getting drafted highly. But I was watching a little bit about this BYU, this BYU game, because I know we want to do a podcast. We definitely think BYU is a possibility for the playoff. Might have taken a little bit of a shot. Oklahoma State needs to drop out. They need a little help. But with this schedule, if they beat Boise State in a couple weeks, definitely a chance. Definitely a chance. They got Western Kentucky next week before that trip to Boise State. Definitely a chance at a playoff spot here. But I'm getting Blake Bortles vibes off of Zach Wilson. Fair or unfair?
I can see where you're going with that. But once again, all the love that he's getting is definitely warranted. He's having a great year so far. They're putting up points. They're explosive on the offense side of the ball. So just like you said, we definitely going to do a podcast talking about this BYU team in depth and if they can make a playoff run. I think they can. But just like you said, once again, I don't think they can kind of keep up with the elite programs like the Clemsons and the Alabamas and Ohio States. And I think that's one thing the committee is going to look for this year because they want to put something good on paper and something good for the fans. So it's going to be a stretch for BYU to kind of get in there. But once again, if they keep winning out, it's going to be hard to kind of not put them in there, but they're going to need a little help. And one of the teams that you mentioned is Oklahoma State is going to have to lose in order for BYU to kind of move up there. And Notre Dame, of course, and Notre Dame has that vaunted matchup coming up with Clemson, so we kind of check that we check that off as a loss already. So, but once again, BYU is going to need some help up top. So we shall see moving forward.
Hey, Indiana beating Penn State, that's some help, right? So hey, they're getting the help. It'll come slowly, week by week. But I expect to see the Cougars to continue to climb in the polls. Looking forward to that. Looking forward to that Boise game in a couple of weeks here. We definitely need to do that. We're going to do that podcast this week, talking about BYU's chances for the playoffs. All right. NC State, the number 23 Wolfpack, going to North Carolina, number 14 in the country. And the Tar Heels, they just laid the smackdown on the Wolfpack, 48-21. NC State, I believed in you. I'm watching this game here. Just tuned in a little bit. Javonte Williams, running back, total monster per PFF College on Twitter. Javonte Williams forced 17 missed tackles against NC State, most in the game this season. How did North Carolina lose to Florida State? Absolutely shocking, because Florida State turned into who they were. They turned into a pumpkin again this week. I guess they just lived that one night, or I should say one half against North Carolina. So one bad half in Tallahassee is going to cost North Carolina a lot in the long run.
Yeah, you're right about that. Especially with North Carolina State bouncing back, big win against NC State. And just like you said, we always talk about Sam Howell and his offense, but we have to give some love to the running backs in the backfield who'll be racking up yards. So, but once again, you mentioned earlier, Nick, about North Carolina and Miami being that play-in game for the ACC championship, and I think that's probably going to hold true. But you can't lose to Florida State if you're North Carolina. That kind of ruined everything for you moving forward. So the only thing that North Carolina do, they have to win out. And if they want to kind of, make a playoff push, they have to beat Clemson, which I honestly don't think anyone in the ACC can do. But once again, that's why you play. You play the game. So
play the game. Yep.
You play the games. But once again, this UNC team just dismantled NC State, up front on both sides of the ball, offense and defense. And once again, Mac Brown got the team rolling, got the team motivated, and Sam Howell and his running game. When it's rolling, this North Carolina team is definitely one of the top teams in the nation, but it's definitely not an elite program yet. They're missing pieces as well. Great recruiting classes coming up. Mac Brown is recruiting, but they're just not there yet. But once again, if they can kind of take care of the business week in and week out, they're going to be competing for ACC championships, in the upcoming years.
Rob, 4-1 Tar Heels. They got Virginia and Duke the next 2 weeks. You seeing that stopping them from getting to 6-1?
I don't see those two teams stopping North Carolina from getting 6-1.
Okay. So
once again,
then you got Wake Forest, Notre Dame, and Miami. That's a 3-game stretch to end the season right there.
Yeah, tough 3-game stretch, and I know people kind of scoff at Wake Forest, but Wake Forest had a big upset win against Virginia Tech.
Yep.
We're going to talk about that. But yeah, just like you mentioned earlier, it is really shaping up like that North Carolina and Miami matchup is going to be a play-in game for the ACC championship.
Yeah, North Carolina, Notre Dame too. So North Carolina, you certainly hold your own destiny in your hands. And let's be real. If you take care of business in the regular season, you get a shot at Clemson. North Carolina's not totally out of playoff hunt, because if you go with one loss and beat Clemson in the ACC title game, you're a playoff team. So technically still in the playoff hunt, but I guess the FSU game was just damaging perception-wise right now. So good win, good bounce back for North Carolina. Credit for bouncing back. You still hold your own destiny in your hands, which is all you can really ask for in college football. All right, Michigan goes to Minnesota, college game day this week. Hey, the Gophers, they came out swinging. They looked like this was going to be competitive early, but Michigan quickly put any thoughts to that to bed, and it was really just a beating in the second half. Good debut for quarterback Joe Milton. I think I saw someone tweet out, I forget who it was, but they said Joe Milton looks like the creative quarterback on the old NCAA video games, which I was cracking up because he's huge. He's a big dude. He can move too. Got just a solid arm. Probably needs to work on his touch a little bit, but he can fire it. Nearly 500 yards of offense for Josh Gaddis, the offensive coordinator. Does Harbaugh finally have an offense to go with the solid defense, or did Minnesota just lose a lot defensively, and that's what we saw on Saturday night?
This is probably one of the game of the weeks for me that I circle on the schedule this week, Nick. And I was kind of disappointed, especially in Minnesota performance that they put up. Tanner Morgan, he had a really, really tough night, but that Michigan defense made it a tough night for him. It really seems like John Harbaugh has this team gelled together on the offense side of the ball and the defense side of the ball. How many running backs did Michigan put out there? It just seems like they had a stable of running backs, man. And whoever got the ball, it seemed like they were capable, kind of, being the lead back. So that is definitely going to bode well for Michigan moving forward. And if Michigan kind of play like this on both sides of the ball, it's going to be a great matchup between them and Ohio State.
Let's start hyping them up for Ohio State, Rob. Go for it. You're going to beat Ohio State. This is the year of Michigan. Come on, hype them up.
This is the year. If you're a fan of the Maize and Blue, this is probably one of the better years to do it, especially in the shortened season. I think Harbaugh and Michigan kind of do it this year. Joe Milton, you mentioned him looking like the creative player of the old NCAA. But another thing I was seeing throughout social media was the Cam Newton comparison. So anytime you have a Cam Newton comparison, especially on the collegiate level, you know what he did on the collegiate level. He won a national championship and he won a Heisman. So that's pretty good company to be in, Joe Milton. I tell you that. But this Michigan team really, really looked really well, Nick, and I was really impressed.
Very impressive, but Minnesota, they did lose a bit on the defensive side of the ball. So that's the only if I'll give you on that, if anyone's doubting the Wolverines' performance. But it is interesting too, because you see Tariq Black, I believe he transferred to Texas. Yeah, Nico Collins out on the wide receiver. So a lot of new guys moving around here for the Wolverines. But change might be good. Might be a good thing for them. Maybe just a different group will bring a different level of cohesiveness, and we'll see how it goes. Hey, look, you got Michigan State. If you're Michigan next week, not expecting a lot of problems there based on what we saw out of Sparty. At Indiana in 2 weeks, Rob. At Indiana, and then versus Wisconsin. So you got Indiana, Wisconsin. Let's see how they do before we go talking about Ohio State. But I'll let you hype it up just so that Michigan fans can get disappointed when they lose to Ohio State. So you got one more Michigan hype up for Ohio State about how they're going to beat Ohio State?
This is the year. If you're a fan of the Maize and Blue, this is the year. Joe Milton, he's getting comparisons to Cam Newton. On social media, people saying he's looking like a creative player. That defense, this is the year. So if you're a fan of the Maize and Blue, Big Blue, go Big Blue. This is the year you're going to knock off Ohio State.
All right, so that was your Michigan hype up moment, brought to you by every Buckeye fan across the country. Enjoy that. Enjoy your 7 weeks of hype before you play Ohio State. All right, Virginia Tech goes down to Winston-Salem. 10-point favorite here, 10.5 in some spots, 9.5 in other spots. Hendon Hooker definitely showed up on the stat sheet for the Hokies at quarterback, both through the air and on the ground. But yeah, Virginia Tech, they consistently struggle to put up points on the board, and Wake Forest pull off the upset as a double-digit dog, Rob. They end up winning 23-16.
Yeah, definitely a disappointing loss for Virginia Tech. They've been playing some really good ball early in the year. But once again, this Wake Forest team came out. They were very, very competitive, and they got the upset win. So you tip your hats off to Wake. But once again, more so telling about this Virginia Tech team than Wake. So I was very disappointed in this loss for Virginia Tech.
Kansas goes to Kansas State. Battle of Sunflower State. The Wildcats just absolutely torch the Jayhawks. 55-7 in the fourth quarter before Kansas scores with under 5 minutes left to take it to 55-14. Not a huge surprise here. Let's focus. I don't want to focus heavily on Kansas. We've talked about Kansas already. Got a long way to go with building. Kansas State, though, suddenly a front runner in the Big 12 alongside Oklahoma State. I know like a lot of people probably wrote them off after a week 1 loss to Arkansas State, but you're 4-0 in conference play. You have at West Virginia versus Oklahoma State in 2 weeks, at Iowa State, at Baylor, at Texas, or versus Texas. So how are we feeling about that stretch, Rob? Let's go game by game again. At West Virginia, feeling good?
I'm feeling good for Kansas State.
All right. Versus Oklahoma State, coin flip, right?
That's going to be a tough one right there, but I say that's a coin flip game.
Home game, though. Home game. Not that it matters too much this year. At Iowa State, another tough game for Kansas State.
I kind of give the edge to Kansas State in that game.
At Baylor, definitely the edge of Kansas State in that game. Right?
Yep. I agree with that one.
All right. And versus Texas.
Once again, I think Kansas State can win that one. I think the coin flip game is that Oklahoma State game. So if they can get past Oklahoma State, we might see Kansas State run the ball, run the table within the Big 12.
Yeah, and I mean you beat Oklahoma State, you beat Iowa State. I think you definitely punch your ticket to at least the Big 12 title game. But West Virginia, Baylor, certainly winnable games, and you get Texas at home. I always feel like Kansas State plays Texas tough anyway, let alone when it's in Manhattan. So, hey, this might be a team. We're not talking playoff because you're not getting in the playoff with a loss to Arkansas State. Sorry, Kansas State. But in terms of Big 12, might be looking good for that. All right, Florida Atlantic goes to Marshall. Florida Atlantic only their second game of the year. Marshall wins 20-9. Not going to spend a lot of time on that. Not a lot to talk about there. Georgia Southern goes to Coastal Carolina. The number 25 Coastal Carolina Chanticleers. They get 14 points in the fourth quarter to win 28-14. Good win by Coastal Carolina to improve to 5-0. Georgia Southern, they battled. Like I said, it was tied in the fourth quarter. Hell of a celebration afterwards by Coastal in the locker room. WWE style. They bring in a guy dressed in the Eagle costume. Of course, Georgia Southern's mascot is the Eagle. And they're breaking tables like Bill's Mafia and wrestlers. Incredible stuff. Did you happen to catch that?
Yeah, I did see that. I thought that was entertaining. But it's kind of been some entertaining things surrounding this Coastal Carolina program. I don't know if you remember the coach, in his press conference comparing his players to cats. He said he needed dogs. So I think it's a lot of things that's been pretty entertaining surrounding this Coastal Carolina program. But the difference then until now is that they're actually winning. So these antics, whether it's post game, pre game, they're living up to the bill on the field. So I'm okay with these celebrations for Coastal Carolina.
Great win by Coastal. They're in control in the Sun Belt. The fun team. I like checking in on them. I always watch a little bit of their games when they're on. Love that teal turf in Myrtle Beach. Got to check that out sometime. Got to get up there for a game at some point. Mercer goes to Army and the Bears. They lose 49-3. Sorry, Mercer. Auburn, they sneak by Ole Miss 35-28. Tank Bigsby runs for 129 yards, 2 touchdowns. Seth Williams puts on a show, including hurdling a guy and breaking off a 58-yard TD late to pull off a 35-28 win. Ole Miss was scrappy. They were up 28-27 late before the Williams TD. But they keep making big mistakes. Matt Corral throws an interception early in the red zone. And Kiffin has these Rebels. They're fighting every week. They're close. But they need to cut down on the mistakes. They cut down on the mistakes, and they'll pull off one of these upsets.
Yeah, I think you're right. Lane Kiffin has his team, sticking in there week in and week out. That's one thing that's going to be tough in the SEC conference. When you have an SEC conference only schedule, you really don't get much air to kind of breathe with the non-conference opponent. But I think this game was more. For me, it was more so of the maturation of Bo Nix. It really seemed like everything clicked this game, and moving forward, we might see a different Bo Nix. I know he's been struggling earlier in the year, but this might be the turning point for Bo Nix moving forward. And you mentioned the play that Seth Williams had. Like he's going to be a guy who's playing on Sunday moving forward. I think he's just so athletic and so talented. You kind of see these plays from Seth Williams every other game, either that or, you kind of have him on that You Got Moss segment that Randy Moss does on NFL, prime time. So I think Seth Williams is definitely a high draft pick in this year's upcoming draft. But this game is all about Bo Nix, if you ask me.
Well, hey, the Ole Miss defense is a good defense to get right against if you're struggling offense. We saw Seth Williams and Bo Nix have a little chat on the sideline against South Carolina out of frustration the week before. Nice bounce back for Auburn. Definitely a tough game. Ole Miss is scrappy this year. They play LSU at home next week, 3:30 on CBS. You lose your right guard, Brandon Council, for the season if you're the Auburn Tigers. You never want to lose a starter along the line. But you got LSU next week. You take care of business there, and you can work to salvage the season here. You could slowly work to salvage this season a little bit. It's been a little disappointing so far, but LSU at Mississippi State versus Tennessee, good stretch to get right here before Alabama. But LSU, who knows what they're about after what we saw after what we saw on Saturday night. All right, let's cut over to the Big 12 real quick. Oklahoma, they just crushed TCU 33-14. Frogs get a late TD that didn't even matter. Rattler goes off for 332. 2 touchdowns for the air. Oklahoma cruises it in this one. You got anything to say about it, Rob?
Yeah, nah, just Spencer Rattler. It really seems like he's coming into his own. He got benched a couple games before, but it really seems like him and Lincoln Riley is getting on the same page. So with that being said, it's like Oklahoma, they have to win out to kind of even be mentioned in there. But even if they do, I think that the losses that they suffer it's so hard for them to overcome that. So I don't think they're really going to be playing for a playoff position this year.
Memphis beats Temple 41-29. Charlotte 38. UTEP 28. Louisville just absolutely obliterates Florida State a week after the Noles beat the Tar Heels. Rob, we're not going to dive too much into this game because there's not a whole lot to say, but 2 points in the second half for Florida State. 569 total yards for Louisville. Just not a very good team, Tallahassee, this year. So you're going to have to stick with it, Seminole fans. It's going to be a little time to build up. But, hey, if there's one fan base that's been patient across America, the Rutgers Scarlet Knight fans. They're losers of 21 straight Big Ten games. Their last win was on November 4th, 2017 over Maryland. They take advantage of 7 Michigan State turnovers. They jump up 28-13 by halftime. They hold on to win the second half, 38-27. Huge win for Rutgers. What a start to the Greg Schiano era in Piscataway.
Yeah, just like you said, huge win for Greg Schiano and the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. That's a huge win, not only for Rutgers, but for the state of New Jersey. Unfortunately, Michigan State is probably gonna have these losses moving forward. D'Antoni is out as the head coach, which is a huge turnaround. It really seemed like this Michigan State team is not going to be the Michigan State team that we've grown to seeing. But once again, big win to Rutgers, and you take your hats off to Greg Schiano for actually wanting this job and wanting to kind of be back in the Big Ten to kind of compete week in and week out.
Yeah, Mel Tucker's got a rebuilding job on his hands in East Lansing. Rutgers plays Indiana next week, 3:30 on the Big Ten Network. Little tension. It's going to be on that game, maybe for some sicko Big Ten fans like us. We'll be watching that game. Rutgers and Indiana. Pumped to watch that one next week. All right, Southern Mississippi. They go to Liberty. They end up losing 56-35. Liberty rolling. UCF 51-34 over Tulane. Low-key, solid uniform game. UCF busting out the space uniforms and Tulane going with the baby blues. Fun uniform game there. Check out that UCF Tulane game. Look up a few pictures from it. Middle Tennessee State beats Rice 40-34. Did you see the field goal Rice missed to lose that ended up leading to the loss? But Rice was going for a game winner. It bounces off the left crossbar, the middle crossbar, the right crossbar, the middle again, and then falls in front of the goalpost as no good.
Yeah, that was a tough one. That was a tough one. Definitely devastating. Definitely devastating kick. But you kind of feel for the kicker. But sometimes that's just the way the cookie crumbles. We've seen those type
Never
of
seen
kicks
a cookie
before.
crumble like that.
I mean, we've seen some type of we've seen crossbar kicks. I mean, one kick that comes to mind is definitely Mason Crosby kick, in that playoff game with the Cowboys. So that's one of those crossball kicks. Cut.
Yep, crossbar kicks.
Crossbar.
Yeah.
The Raiders. But yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
back in 3, 2, 1, go.
But yeah, just like you said, that was a devastating kick. You kind of feel for the kicker, but once again, you see those, not too often. But I mean, that's definitely a devastating the way to lose the game.
Rice field goal. Look it up if you haven't seen it. All right. Houston defeats Navy 37-21. Texas gets a 27-16 win over Baylor. Purdue beats Iowa 24-20. I was a little surprised by that one. Georgia State gets a 36-34 win over Troy. Boston College 48, Georgia Tech 27. Western Kentucky, it defeats Tennessee Chattanooga 13-10. Another surprising result here. That's why I want to talk about it. Mizzou 20, Kentucky 10. Rob, the Tigers held the Cats to 145 total yards. 145 total yards. Dominant defense and doing just enough on offense. The Missouri really controlled this one from start to finish, and they pull off their second straight upset. What happened in this game? Kentucky only threw for 47 yards. And then my real question for you is, Missouri goes to the Swamp next week. Should the Gators be worried?
I think the Gators should be worried. This Missouri team has kind of been, pretty feisty this year. I know they suffer a couple losses, but it seems like they've been competing in every game. And I know you've been high on the Kentucky Wildcats, but they really disappointed me. I thought they was going to go out. I thought they was going to go out and get the win. But it really seems like, they've fallen off the cliff the last couple of weeks. But, you tip your hats off to this Missouri team who's been playing pretty feisty. So I think the Gators should be worried. But once again, with the time off and, I really think Florida is going to, bounce back, especially from the Texas A&M loss and all the COVID cases that they had. So I really give the edge to Florida in this one, but I don't think it's going to be an easy game for the Gators.
Yeah. Hey, this is a Missouri team that it did beat LSU, but it was a shootout. So they're proving they can win in a different way. Eli Drinkwitz, hey, he might be a little force to be reckoned with here in Columbia. I wasn't expecting much from Missouri this year. Turns out, got to pay attention to the Tigers. Well, I won't overlook them again. My mistake. I thought this Kentucky team could easily handle that one. All right, let's go. West Virginia drops a game in Lubbock to Texas Tech. The Red Raiders win 34-27. Let's pop back to the SEC. The LSU Tigers starting TJ Finley, new quarterback. Miles Brennan's out 52-24 against South Carolina. A lot of folks picked South Carolina to win this one, but I've watched enough Will Muschamp football to know better. I didn't expect this from LSU. They just shredded Carolina. Like I said, freshman quarterback TJ Finley keeps the Tigers offense rolling. The defense played significantly better, and that's the real storyline here. Is this a step forward for LSU, or do you see the Tigers dropping to Auburn and Alabama over the next 3 weeks?
Yeah, I eventually see them dropping those games over the next few weeks, but this is a step forward for LSU. Putting up 52 points. They have talent, but once again, it's definitely you don't never want to say it's a rebuild year for LSU, but with all the talent that they lost, it really kind of is. And of course, with Miles Brennan being out, you kind of want to see him kind of get acclimated with the offense and get acclimated with the team. But I think this was a great win for LSU, though.
Yeah, you'd like to have seen South Carolina build on the momentum of the win over Auburn. Again, we've said we've watched enough Will Muschamp to know better, though. That's consistency is not their thing at South Carolina right now. Got to hope that they'll bounce back though this season. So, all right, Louisiana Monroe drops a game to South Alabama, 38-14. The South Alabama program, they're fighting this year. They've been down for a while and they're racking up a few wins here. Boise State cruises 42-13 over Utah State. Nevada beats Wyoming 37-34 in overtime. Hawaii gets a win at Fresno State 34-19. I believe that was Todd Graham's debut for the Warriors. Maryland goes to Northwestern. This is the last game we're going to really talk about and dive into. The Wildcats, 43, Maryland, 3. Tualia Tungavailoa started, and it wasn't pretty. So Baby Tua, as we refer to him in our group chat, Baby Tua, 14 of 25 for 95 yards and 3 picks. Northwestern shook off their poor offensive output from 2019. They explode for 45 points. Are the Cats back on offense? Rob, what's going on with that? We surprised her, or is this looking at like it was a bad Maryland team they took advantage of?
I think it was a bad Maryland team that they took advantage of. And once again, it was the first game. So I don't want to say, this Northwestern team on the offense side of the ball is back. But I tell you what, one thing that's consistent with Northwestern is their defensive play, and their defense was pretty stout. So I give that to Northwestern. But once again, I would like to wait, a couple games to see how they play on the offense side of the ball moving forward.
What's up with this Mike Locksley hire? He was a total disaster at New Mexico. He gets the Saban stamp of approval, and he goes back into the world, and he's got great ties to the DMV area, and you hear he's the guy to really recruit and bring some talent in to really infuse the roster with talent at Maryland. And I'll tell you, I wasn't impressed with what I saw last year, and you're starting out getting just shellacked by Northwestern this year. Not exactly Ohio State that we're talking about. How far off is this Maryland program, and are we going to start looking at the Mike Locksley hire a little closely as the season goes along?
I think we will, at least for this year, since it's a shortened season. And once again, he really didn't have a whole off season to kind of prepare. But just like you said, Mike Locksley is one of the best recruiters that we have in the nation. I think he gets this program turned around. And if he doesn't get it turned around to his standards or to the fan base's standard, he's definitely going to have them competing in the Big Ten, sooner than later.
Yeah, I'm just talking about making bowl games. I'm not talking about being a really hardcore competitive program. You'd like to see a new coach in the Big Ten have the team making bowl games on a consistent basis by year 2 and year 3 if this thing's going to go in a positive direction. But I was a little disappointed with this output. I expected Maryland to compete a little more in this game. You hear a lot about some of the talent they bring in, and right now, Maryland football, it's kind of all hype. It's all hype until we see it on the field. So gotta keep that in mind going forward with Maryland. All right, let's finish out the week. Louisiana Tech drops a game to UTSA. Texas San Antonio 27-26. San Diego State beats UNLV 34-6, and San Jose State 17, Air Force 6. Welcome back, Big Ten. Welcome back, Mountain West. Rob, you ready to go to the Did You Know, or do you got any final thoughts?
No final thoughts for me. We can definitely go to the Did You Know.
Let's do it.
And it's going to be, hopefully it's a tough one, and hopefully I trip you up. But once again, we're going to go down to Tallahassee, and we're going to talk about the Florida State Seminoles. One of the best things for me waking up every Saturday morning is watching College Game Day and seeing Lee Corso. And you and me both know that Lee Corso played at Florida State. So the Did You Know question is, who was Lee Corso's roommate when he played at Florida State?
Who was Lee Corso's roommate when he played at Florida State? All right, we'll come back with that answer after this break. American Football Stories is brought to you by CoachMate. CoachMate is a great tool that allows us to add graphics to player highlight clips similar to graphics you see on TV. CoachMate offers the ability to clearly tell a straight video while increasing retention of information in a shorter amount of time. Up your game with CoachMate today.
Before the break, Nick, we asked the Did You Know question, asked it to you and to the audience out there. While Lee Corso was playing at Florida State, who was Lee Corso's roommate?
Well, Rob, I know we were supposed to make these questions hard, and that certainly would be hard if I didn't already know it.
Well, tell the fans and tell the audience who was it?
I was just leaving you hanging to see what your reaction would be. It was Burt Reynolds.
Correct, Nick. Burt Reynolds. Burt Reynolds starred in the first Longest Yard movie. He was actually a Florida State guy before he got into acting. Him and Lee Corso, great friends. Burt Reynolds and Lee Corso's roommates in Florida State in their playing days. Once again, Burt Reynolds, who knew he was a Florida State, player and a teammate of Lee Corso's, but hopefully you knew, and hopefully, our audience knows now. So
I only know that because I've been to the FSU campus a bunch, know a little bit about the program, but I believe there's a Reynolds Hall at Florida State named after Burt Reynolds. And then they do talk about that a lot, that he's one of their famous alums, but he also, if you go back into especially in the 90s and stuff, 80s and 90s, when the program was coming up under Bowden, you see him on the sidelines at a lot of those old games. If you go back and watch old games.
Yeah, you had to love Burt Reynolds. I really didn't get a chance to see him play, in college, but I love his movies and everything. So that was just a great to see Lee Corso, kind of recognizing Burt Reynolds on college game day the way that he does, week in and week out. So I always thought that's great.
Yeah, that's great. All right, Rob, that's all I got this episode. You want to read us out?
Appreciate you listening to this episode of American Football Stories. Please find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Please subscribe and rate us 5 stars. Follow us on Twitter at American FB Stories, and check out our website at AmericanFootballStories.com. Once again, my name is Robert Parker III, and my co-host is Nick Knudsen. Thank you, and tune in to next week's episode.
You play to win the game. Hello? You play to win the game. You don't play to just play it. That's the great thing about sports. You play to win. And I don't care if you don't have any wins. You go play to win. When you start telling me it doesn't matter, then retire. Get out. Because it matters.
I hope there's Bigfoot. I don't think there is. The reason I don't think there is because we found bones of dinosaurs and everything else, but we haven't found bones that I've heard of Bigfoot.
I'm very upset. We should have been in the ball game with fast field goal. The coach had sent him in. We shouldn't have sent him in. That's a dang coaching mistake. The kids are playing their tail off, and the coaches are screwing it up.
We just got to stop that little inside trap. The option didn't hurt us much. We played pretty hard. We just got to stop that inside thing. Offensively, we kind of sputtered around, got the ball in the end zone. Defensively, we got to get out off the field on that 2-minute drive.
Injuries to your offensive line. What do you do in the second half?
Oh, we're just go play. We just got to keep playing.
Thank you, Coach.
He has a magnificent personality, I'll tell you.
We receive a lot of mail during the course of the season, and a lot of it's good mail, a lot of it's bad. And one of the
I would say that most of it is good, though, isn't it, Bill?
Yeah, I think so.
I'd say 95 to 98% of the mail we get is always good.
But the one question that keeps coming up where Woody Hayes' name is involved, they say you're a man of no mercy. And yet,
frankly, I don't care much what they think.